Second video for this week. We left off right about here in chapter 15, and here you can see some interesting drawings here of what the oceans looked like during the Mesozoic. And I mentioned before that the Mesozoic era was or is famous for dinosaurs, and we will talk about the 7 kinds of dinosaurs. But before we do that, we need to mention some other real important vertebrates of the Mesozoic. And I'm going to write them down for you so you can put it down in your notes. There are some 3 main types of marine reptiles that we need to look at. Marine reptiles are not dinosaurs. They are marine reptiles. Let's take a look and see what they look like. And I'll describe some things about them that you need to know. We got ichthyosaurs. We need to know about mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. These are the main 3 types of marine reptiles that are famous from the Mesozoic era. So I'm going to cover them one at a time, and there'll be pictures on the final exam or descriptions of these reptiles, and we need to know how to identify them. So let's talk about them one at a time. One of the most famous reptiles of the Mesozoic are the plesiosaurs. This is what a plesiosaur looks like. It is not a dinosaur. It's a marine reptile. So since being a reptile, it has lungs and it breathed. These got to be enormous. Sometimes 20, 30, 40 feet long. Some people think one's alive today in Loch Ness in Scotland, but I wouldn't believe it, because if there was one there, it would be sticking its neck out of the water all the time. These went extinct, as did all the marine reptiles 65 million years ago. Some things that that might help you remember this plesiosaur is it had 4 paddle-like arms, and this form of locomotion doesn't exist anymore, but back in the Mesozoic, they would use 2 paddle-like arms on one side to turn right, or 2 paddle-like arms to turn left. They would use all 4 paddle-like arms for great bursts of speed forward to catch their prey. They ate things like cephalopods. They would eat fish. And another thing about them is they have a very long neck, small head, so we don't think they were very intelligent. These are called plesiosaurs. Plesiosaurs. Let's move on to the second marine reptile you need to know about, and these are the ichthyosaurs. It's always helpful to know a little bit of Latin. Ichthyo means fish, and so ichthyosaur means fish lizard. And let's take a look and see what they look like. This is what an ichthyosaur looks like. Here you can see one eating a cephalopod. Well, I'm sure you know what they look like. What do they look like in the world today that's alive? They look like dolphins, don't they? Or porpoises. These are the marine reptiles that were most adapted to living in the water. But as with all reptiles and mammals as well, they have to come up for air. They don't have gills, they have lungs. You can see they have a fish-like dorsal fin and pectoral fins and a tail fin, but this is a reptile. This is not a fish. Its anatomy doesn't match that of a fish. So, some things we know about them are that they, in comparison to the plesiosaurs, they're different. They gave birth to live young instead of laying eggs. Other marine reptiles might have to go onto the land to lay their eggs, but they gave birth to live young. And the babies tail came out first out of the mother's womb. And the reason why it did that was otherwise the baby would suffocate. There's air inside of the mother's womb. There's no air out in the water. And it might take half an hour to give birth, 2 hours. So the tail fin came out first. The babies would come out, and the first thing that the babies would do is they'd have to go up to the surface to get a gulp of air. Then they would swim down back to the bottom of the ocean, the babies would, to hide amongst the coral reefs or rocks, or they would any place where they could escape the notice of predators. And it was a very dangerous thing being a baby ichthyosaur. It had to go up for air, and it would have to make a mad dash for the surface, and then it would have to go back down. These are predators, as all the marine reptiles are. They had very good eyesight. We could tell from their eye sockets. They had very large eyes, perfect for sighting their prey. These are the what? These are the ichthyosaurs. Now let's take a look at the third marine reptile that you need to know about. These are called the mosasaurs. Mosasaurs are the monsters. They're of the Mesozoic. They were the biggest predators that have ever existed in the oceans. Let's see if I can get a picture of what. It might be on this webpage. No, this is World of Warcraft. So anyway, here, this is what they look like. You can see that. Look how big. Look at this big, large shark being eaten by the mosasaur. Razor sharp teeth, large brain, as evidenced by its large head, 4 paddle-like arms, but it's different than a plesiosaur. It is a very short, muscular neck. Some of these would get 100 feet long. They're the biggest killers that have ever existed in the oceans, much bigger than today's killer whales. And interestingly enough, and if you did happen to go to the Frank H. McClung Museum, there was a skeleton, you might recall, on the ceiling that was a small mosasaur, a juvenile male. But they got quite large, and they were very common here in Tennessee. We find their skeletons all around Mesozoic rocks in Nashville. So these are called what? These are called the mosasaurs. Typical mosasaur. Short neck, muscular neck, paddle-like arms, razor-sharp teeth. So we just covered all of the marine reptiles. Next thing I want to cover are the pterosaurs. A lot of people confuse these with being dinosaurs or flying dinosaurs. It kind of annoys me when I see that in the media. This is not a dinosaur. It does not have a diapsid skull. It doesn't have 2 holes behind its eye socket. It is not a bird. It's a flying reptile. And these flying reptiles, called pterosaurs, there's a spelling for you there, were predators. They had razor-sharp teeth, made for killing, good eyesight. But take a good close look at its wings. How are they different than a bird's wings? Think about it for a moment. Look at its 2 rear legs. How are they different? Well, the first thing that's different is that this reptile does not have feathers. This is all skin. Even this part is colored skin here. It's not feathers. So, and the second thing is, with a bird, the arms come out front, and the arms come out back, and then they have wings, which are covered by feathers. But for the pterosaurs, the arms and legs are part of the wing, and the wing is just a skin flap connecting those 4 their arms and legs. So Scientists have done a lot of research, and we know that these pterosaurs could not have flown like birds. They didn't flap their wings really fast to go through the air. Instead, what they did was they glided upon air currents. So they're kind of like gliders, and they would land and they would have to lay their eggs. The male pterosaurs often look how big these were, much larger than a human being. The male pterosaurs would find a nesting spot, and they would compete with the other males for the best nesting spots. Then they would show their, they would display, sort of like a peacock, and they would try and attract females through their display, and also through the attractiveness of their mating site. You know how convenient was it for the female to land there. Then they would mate. All of the marine reptiles and the pterosaurs practice internal fertilization, where the male organ has to enter into the female organ to produce a new baby. These are called pterosaurs. And there used to be thousands and thousands of these huge pterosaurs like this one here, flying between North America and South America every year. Pterosaurs. It's important to mention that 245 million years ago, after the great mass extinction that occurred at the end of the Permian, which marked the end of the Paleozoic, Pangea had come together, and the Earth had become a lot drier. And now the evidence for that is deserts and those Rift Valley deposits that we talked about in the previous chapter. This basically led to the decimation of the amphibians. Those large amphibians that we talked about in the last chapter, 95% of them are gone. Why did the dinosaurs dominate the planet during the Mesozoic era? The reason why is because dinosaurs don't need as much water. And why don't they need as much water? Well, evidence indicates that when dinosaurs defecated, when they went to the bathroom, less moisture was released. So the animal needed less moisture. Imagine the earth drying up and all the watering holes drying up. Who's going to die out? The amphibians. Amphibians have to lay their eggs in water. They have to keep their skin moist. They were wiped out. Other reptiles, when they defecated, they released a lot more water. So they had a greater demand for water. Who survives in the battle for survival? Those who have an advantage. Isn't that what Darwin said? Who has the advantage? The dinosaurs. And that's why the dinosaurs dominate the Mesozoic era. Plants are very common in the Mesozoic. Here you can see large forests of many tree types that are gymnosperms. They have cones and uncovered seeds. They dominate the Mesozoic, even though angiosperms did appear during the Mesozoic, especially the magnolia, the first flowers. Here's a common type of tree of the Mesozoic, and we still have some of them today. These are called cycads, and you can see that with a cycad tree, all of the leaves fan out from the top of the trunk of the tree. You can still see trees like this in Gioconda. You know about these in Costa Rica, in Panama, in Guatemala, in the Pacific Ocean, island states, or Polynesia. You find these types of trees. These are quite common during the Mesozoic era. Here you can see a picture showing you that angiosperms, they first appeared during the Mesozoic, even though during the Mesozoic the gymnosperms dominate. The angiosperms make their first appearance with the magnolia, the first type of flower. By Cenozoic time, the last era of time that we'll be talking about next week, the angiosperms would dominate the earth. This is how angiosperms reproduce. They use a clever technique to attract insects, hummingbirds, animals, and what do they use? They use flowers, honey, I'm not honey, nectar, fruits, and nuts. So any plant that has flowers, fruits, nectar, or nuts, like walnut trees, hickory nut trees, they attract insects, animals, or birds to spread their seed. And the way they spread their seed is through a form of sexual reproduction. It's not internal fertilization as it is for us and mammals. Instead, what they do is they have pollen, and pollen is sperm. And the insects or the animal or whatever is going to um, get some of that pollen on them, and then as it travels to the next plant, it's going to spread that to the um, to the pistule, which is the it's equivalent to an ovary for an animal, and then there's germination. Sperm and egg make a germinated seed. So here you can see fertilization occurs just like with us. Sperm and egg come together. You form an embryo. The embryo makes a seed. The seed is buried underneath the earth and makes a seedling. Another mature plant forms, which produces flowers, fruits, or nuts, or nectars, and it's spread along. These angiosperms made their appearance during the Mesozoic era. Here you can see one of the earliest one of the earlier Mesozoic angiosperms, and here you can see some beautiful flowers from lower Cretaceous rocks in China. And now we're finally getting beautiful blooms of flowers. There's color coming into the world during the Mesozoic through the angiosperms. Here is something quite important, and it is a phylogenetic tree showing you um, how vertebrates evolved. I would take a good close look at this. It'll help you understand the big picture of the evolution of vertebrates. First note on the bottom is the era of time, the Paleozoic era, the oldest era of the Phanerozoic, followed by the Mesozoic era, the era we're now talking about, and lastly, the Cenozoic era that we're living in now. Here you can see stem reptiles, and out of the stem reptiles came all of these other vertebrates. Of course, the stem reptiles came from amphibians. Amphibians came from the fish all the way over here, off the chart. So anything that goes all the way to the right and ends here to the right is still here today. Snakes, lizards, tuataras. What in God's name is a tuatara? Well, a tuatara is a rare form of reptile that's alive today. Show you what it looks like. It looks like that. It's not a lizard. Its anatomy, even though it might look like a lizard, is much different than a lizard. It's more primitive. Tuataras, birds are still here today. Mammals, turtles, and crocodiles are still here today. But we're going to talk a lot about these other creatures that did not make it. Ichthyosaurs died out during the Mesozoic. Plesiosaurs died out. Dinosaurs died out. Pterosaurs died out during the Mesozoic. Notice that the dinosaurs and the pterosaurs and many of the marine reptiles died out here 65 million years ago. Here it says 66, but we'll just stick with 65 million years ago, most people think. The mammals. Well, the mammals made their first appearance during the Mesozoic, during the Triassic. And let's see what they look like. The first mammals appeared during the Triassic, and they are called therapsids. What are therapsids? Well, here's a typical therapsid. It's probably the most common type of therapsid. It's called a cynodont. I'll spell it for you here. Cynodont. Cynodont. And since they had just evolved from reptiles, they still have many reptilian characteristics. So it's kind of in between becoming mammals and their ancestors, the reptiles. They're quadrupeds, meaning they walked on four legs. Here you can see the. Okay, let's talk about the traits that are very mammalian about this. The first thing is they have some short body hair, so they have some fur. Second thing, they have a four-chambered heart. All mammals, including humans, have four chambers in their heart. Reptiles only have three. They have differentiated teeth, meaning that mammals have different kinds of teeth that serve different functions, such as molars, incisors, canines. We don't have canines, but lots of mammals do. So we have different teeth that serve different functions. Reptiles their teeth are all the same. Other features that made this a reptilian sort of creature is that when it walked, its backbone moved back and forth like a reptile. It still laid eggs like a reptile. It would dig holes in the ground and lay their eggs in there. And its ear bones were much more complicated, like a reptile's. It didn't hear as well as modern day mammals do. They lived in a world, these cynodonts, where they were in constant fear of attack by dinosaurs who dominated the world. They would sleep all night in the burrows that they dug deep underground, hoping that the dinosaurs wouldn't find those burrows. They'd only come out at night to hunt for anything they could get. Maybe small pterosaurs, maybe baby dinosaurs, maybe insects, snails, anything they could eat, and they would bring it back to the burrow. Other features that make them clearly mammalian, this therapsid clearly a mammal, is that there is evidence of a mothering instinct. That the mothers would, the fossils, we can see mothers dying close to their young. This is not a reptilian trait. And, interestingly enough, there is a fathering instinct. We also see that another mammalian trait where you find old males and females who had died together. That is this pairing off of male and female to make a couple is a mammalian trait. It's not a reptilian trait. You don't see turtles or lizards pairing for life. Well, apparently they did, these cynodonts. So they are quite mammalian. Another thing that shows they're clearly mammals is they have milk teats, so that the babies would suck the milk from the mother's teats. These are called what? These are called cynodonts, or a type of therapsid. During the Triassic, the dinosaurs made their debut, so to speak. And you can see that the first dinosaurs looked like this. These are bipedal dinosaurs, meaning they walked on two legs. The earliest dinosaurs were bipeds, not quadrupeds. They were carnivores. How do we know that? Well, look at the sharp teeth. Teeth made for killing. Look at the large brain case, high intelligence, required by any predator. So, this is what an early dinosaur looked like. There are 7 kinds of dinosaurs, and I will talk about those in the next video. There'll probably be 4 videos for this week because I'm doing little short segments. So watch the next video.